of renal unit. He is member of research unit in internal medicine at Livingston University Teaching Hospital, and he is current member and EMD and MPH at the Institute of Topical Medicine at Verp, Belgium. Thank you all for being here. It was a pleasure, Dr. Oscar Gongo, being here today.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be among you today and to have a nice presentation on review articles. Right from the beginning, I would like to say that I don't have any conflict of interests in relation with this presentation. What are the objectives that we are going to achieve today? By the end of this presentation, all participants should be able to know the common types of review articles and then differentiate review articles using definition, reason, or the motivation to do those reviews, how to conduct those reviews, and how to report those reviews. What are the common types of reviews? We have systematic review, literature review, meta-analysis, scoping review, rapid review, living, systematic review, umbrella review, mixed method review, network meta-analysis. Of course, the list is not exhaustive, but this look for me very common in our practice. So let's start with the first one, is systematic review. So we'll go through the definition.
Doctor, sorry I interrupt you, but we can see your presentation. I don't know if it's something with the PowerPoint.
You can see.
No, we at the beginning we could, but right now we just see like a blue square with lines, but we don't see text. We just see a square, a blue square. But I don't know if it's something with the power.
So maybe let's do this. I will send to you through your email.
Okay. Yeah.
Then you can start following the presentation from that side.
Of course.
Okay.
I have received your presentation right now. So I'm starting to download it, and then I'm gonna present it. And just a moment, please. Uh, okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Mm.
Can you see it now? Pueden verla todos los
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Ceci, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to continue, doctor.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah. Yeah, I think by the end of the day, by the end of this presentation, I think we should be able to know the common reviews article, and we should be able to differentiate the different articles. So we are going to start with systematic review. We'll go through the definition, reasons, when should we do systematic review, and how should we conduct the systematic review, and how to report systematic review. So, what's systematic review? What is it? So, a systematic review attempts to identify, appraise, synthesize all the empirical evidence that meet specified eligibility criteria to answer given research question. So we have first a research question that needed to be answered. And then the evidence we found in the articles. So we have to go and look for that evidence in the article. So we have to identify those articles. We have to appraise those articles, synthesize, get the evidence, and answer the question. So always when you do systematic review, there's a question that has been asked to you, or you have asked yourself the question. So you need to provide an answer. So researchers conducting systematic review use explicit methods aimed at minimizing bias in order to produce more reliable findings that can be used to inform decision making. So the evidence that should give should not have biases. If we have biases, so the answer that you are going to give should be a wrong answer. So to avoid biases, there are some methods that should be applied to that research. During the course of the presentation, we'll go through those methods. Let's continue. When can you decide to do systematic review? You are a researcher, you can be asked, you can have a question from decision makers. When should you decide to do systematic review and not another type of study? So if you are planning to start to write a guideline, you want to develop a guideline on management of any condition. So best study that you can use, or best tools that you can use to build your guideline should be the systematic reviews. So you can plan to do the systematic review if you are planning to develop guideline. Because the systematic review are supposed to be unbiased. So, and replicable. Remember I told you about the method that should be applied? Those methods will make sure that that review become replicable. Whenever anyone want to replicate the same thing that was done in class, to be possible. So the systematic review is supposed to be unbiased and a replicable representation of current knowledge with reference to a particular topic. So systematic review should help also to bring together all the best evidence as you know, among the primary studies, randomized control studies are on top. So if there are articles that you should look to build your systematic review, the first choice should be on randomized control trials. Synthesize all available primary-based research studies to provide a more reliable estimate of intervention. So for you to provide an answer to the question that you have or you have been asked, you should use the systematic reviews the way that I've said, because it will help you to build a reliable estimate of intervention. Answer to a question about therapy. So you have any questions on therapy, on prevention, on causes of disease, on harm or side effects that can come from some intervention. So use systematic review. A clear and comprehensive overall of available evidence on a given topic. So that evidence you can only find in systematic review. If you want to inform healthcare decision or practice, you find the evidence in the systematic review, because it's a selection of the best studies that give you answer to most of the questions that you can ask yourself. Let's continue. So, how are you going to conduct a systematic review? You should have the protocol. It is a must. It's one of the steps where you can't say, no, I'm not going to do protocol. You have to do the protocol. And that protocol, you may find in Prisma, well elaborated. It's just a summary. You can go to Prisma website and get the full details. But in that protocol, there should be some administrative information like the title, the registration. Have you registered your review? What you want to do? The authors should be stated there, and the support that you are going to have to conduct that systematic review. You have promised or you have got already like a fund to work on that systematic review. So everything should be clear in the protocol. Then the introduction and the method. The method should be well elaborated in a systematic review. The method are like your roadmap on everything that you are going to do, and to make sure that there are no biases, so that the evidence that should come from your study or from your review should be reliable. Now, how are you going to conduct systematic review? Start with formulating the question. You can even reformulate the question. Okay, remember I told you the research starts always by a question. You can ask yourself the question, or the research can come from decision makers. That question should be put in answerable format. It's the format PICO. P stands for population, it can be patient, it can be problem. I, intervention. C, comparator, and R, O, output. All questions should follow this format, because the next step, you are going to do them easily if the question is in answerable form. Then to define inclusion and exclusion criteria, remember you have to get some good articles in order to build the evidence. So you should set the inclusion and the exclusion criteria. Then 2, 3, search for studies. You have to look for those studies. It can be through internet, in electronic form. Then you have to select among those studies that you can get from the database, electronic database. You have to select. You are not going to get everything. You select. The first step of selection is a screening of title and the abstract. Once you are done, you are going to see that you are going to drop some articles from there. After the screening of title and the abstract, you do the screening or the review of the full text. Then you can select the studies. After selection of studies is a critical appraisal. You have to appraise your studies. Try to find out if there are some risk of biases. After that, you are going to do the data extraction. Continue. Then you synthesize your data. You can present, you can interpret, you can draw the conclusion. Then you can assess the certainty of evidence, because from your data synthesis, you get evidence. Now you want to know how certain the quality of that evidence. This is one of the critical steps and the most important. Assess certainty of evidence. Then you can formulate the implication for practice and for research, and then disseminate your review. Once you are done with the conduction of your review, you have to report. You have to make a report. You can still use Prisma and find the details, all the details on the way that you have to report a systematic review. So it starts with the title. This is just a summary to give an idea, but the full details you get from Prisma. Title, abstracts, introduction, method, result, discussion, conclusion, and the other information should be stated there, like how your research was funded. Information should be clear. You register, your review was registered. So those other information should also appear clearly. Continue. I think we are done with review, systematic review. Now we are moving to literature review. It's another form of review. We'll go through the definition, the reason of doing it, and how to conduct it, and then how to report. I don't know if there's a question related to systematic review so that we can answer before we move on.
¿Alguna pregunta de los que están aquí presentes? Se la quiere hacer en español y la podemos hacer en inglés al doctor. At the moment I have a question. Could you please, doctor, tell us what is bias exactly? And how we can prevent it in our researches?
Okay. Thank you very much. The bias are something that we should avoid in research, because we want to get reliable conclusion. And the decision makers, they are always waiting for the end result of our reviews in order to make a decision. So biases, there are those mistakes that can happen, whether when you are conceiving your study or when you are conducting your study. There are some errors that can happen. So we have to avoid. That's why we do most of the time refer to randomized control trials, because this is the best way of avoiding biases. Randomized control trials. It can start like for a bias in selection of participants in the study. There can be a bias there. Like You want to conduct a study, then you say only those who are willing, you can register. So you may end up having just one category of people that may have one of the problem. So meaning the time that you are going to make your conclusion to be a wrong conclusion, because those who have maybe the problem that we want to find out, they are not a member of that sample. So in a better way to avoid biases, it's always advised to refer to randomized control trials so that we can select people without any imbalance. Okay, so the selection should the attribute the are you getting?
Yeah, doctor. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, the way that you should assign people, the participant in the different arm of a study should be, we should use a randomly way of doing it. Is to be randomized attribution of people in those different groups. Don't use a different way. And during the course of the study, we shall make sure that the patients are blinded. Those who are conducting the research are blinded. Those who are reporting on what the research should be blinded. So everyone should be blinded to avoid any bias to take place. And we shall make sure that we avoid attrition during the course of research, like people disappearing, not consistent from the beginning to the end of the research. We want everyone to be from the beginning to the end. And when we are reporting toward the end of our research, the report that we are doing, we should report everything. We should not put some data in the drawer and the other data we put in the report. It can be reporting bias that can take place. So those things, we should know them and we have to avoid them in order to have a study without bias. Yeah. This is some of the information that we can give. But then the study on the biases depend on the type of studies that you are facing. There are some more information depend on the type of study that you have at hand. If you have the randomized control trial, there are some characteristics that you should go through. When you don't have, you have the non-randomized control trial, there are some parameters that you should go through to try to see if there's bias or not. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, doctor, for your answer.
Thank you. Wow. So we are going now through literature review, the same pattern, definition, reason of doing it, how to conduct it, and how to report on literature review. So literature review is just synthesize primary studies and they explore these through description rather than statistics. So here is most of the time is just narration. You are narrating. You want to know the actual state of evidence. You want to know what is true about a specific topic. Then you read on that topic, then you summarize your studies. So something that is particular with literature review, you are going to find that we don't have the rigidity that we have with a systematic review. You are not going to find it like having a lot of method to observe the selection criteria. They are not there. Everything depends on the one who's writing the literature review. Let's continue. Yeah, what are the reasons to conduct a systematic literature review? We want to, if you want to determine what is known on the topic and how well this knowledge is established, and where future research might best be directed. So you want to know what is the knowledge available about a specific topic. And you want to establish also the gap in knowledge that we have at this particular moment. In short, this is the main reason why you can decide to do the literature review. You want to know just what is available, the actual knowledge about a specific topic. And as you are writing, you can use two different approaches. For example, you can use the chronological approach, or you can use the thematic approach. So as you are narrating, you can go by themes, or you can go by chronology, by time. Let's continue. So how to conduct literature review? First, selecting the review topic. So you start with the topic, then you do the searching of the literature. Most of the time, we move through internet to the electronic database, I mean. Then gathering of the articles that you get, reading. You have to read over and over again, and then analyze the literature, and then start writing. Continue. So on the way of reporting, you need just an abstract, you need an introduction, you need a body of your presentation, then you need a conclusion toward the end. So on the abstract, as you know, you put a bit of background, some results, some conclusion, then you do the introduction, methodology that you are going to follow, but knowing in advance that methodology is not followed most of the time when people are doing literature review. It's not rigid as the way that you are doing systematic review, where you set the method prior to research. But here you can start writing, then you say, let me go back to the research and look for another article. Then after methodology, then you can put result and discussion, conclusion, imitation, and the implication. Continue. So what differentiates systematic review from literature review? As you know, systematic review is higher level overview of primary research on a focused question. I always tell you that in research, there is always a question. Whether it's yourself, you're asking yourself a question, or the research come from somewhere else, from decision maker. So this overview that identifies, selects, synthesizes, and then appraise all high quality research evidence relevant to that question. So you have the question, you have to go to the database, get the data, always aim to the higher quality. That's, if you don't get higher quality at that particular moment, yeah, you come down a bit. Then you synthesize. So this is back. So systematic review, you are aiming to have a high quality of evidence to answer the question, okay? But for literature review, it's a qualitative summary of evidence on topic using informal or subjective method to collect and then interpret studies. So not very rigid. The risk of biases is very high with literature review. Another characteristic, we have to specify eligibility and the exclusion criteria. In advance, we should know the inclusion and the exclusion criteria. But for systematic review, but with literature review, it's not necessary. It's not necessary to have the inclusion and exclusion criteria prior to the research. Continue. So the key intention when doing systematic review is to eliminate the bias. That's why when you are doing systematic review, you aim to have the randomized control trials to include in your review so that you minimize the bias. Literature review, the key intention is just to summarize literature on the topic. That's all. Bias is not a big problem for the literature review because they don't use any rigid methodology. The last characteristic, systematic review takes time. It can take months to years to complete, but literature review take weeks or months to complete. Let's continue. Yeah, so we are done with a systematic literature review. Literature review, one can do when you want to know the state of knowledge about a specific topic, but without any rigidity of methodology, then there is risk of bias. Okay, let's move to meta-analysis. We'll go through the same way: definition, reason, doing meta-analysis, how to conduct, how to report or no meta-analysis. So, what's the definition? When the result of individual studies are statistically combined to produce an overall statistic. So, meta-analysis is not enough to combine the data. It's very important to use the statistic to combine those results. And the aim, what we are aiming is to provide a more precise estimate of the effect of intervention and to reduce uncertainty. As you know, you are going to put a big number of studies. The sample size is going to increase. As the sample size increases, you increase the precision of the answer that you are going to have, of the evidence that you are going to have. So if you want to increase the precision, do meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is a statistical combination of results from two or more separate studies. So this is the definition that you can find in Cochrane Handbook. So statistic, yeah, you have to use statistic. Now, what are the reasons of doing? When can you decide to do systematic review? Find result of research quickly. You know, at the moment, the production of the primary studies, like randomized control study per day, is very high. No one can keep up reading and be up to date. But you can use meta-analysis where those results are summarized. Instead of reading a lot of articles, you can just read one and then you are up to date. Another reason is to improve precision. You are going to put together, summarize statistically more than 2 studies, and then as you combine, you increase the size of your sample, the precision increase. Okay, let's continue. Sorry, to answer question not posed by individual studies, yeah, there's some information that you can get as you combine the data, you can get that information. To settle controversy arising from apparently conflicting studies. So you can have, for example, 10 studies, but 2 studies go on one direction where 8 studies do not go. So now you want to find out there's a controversy here. So what is the truth? So you have to do meta-analysis. Then you find the evidence. Continue. Meta-analysis should not be done. So you should not do it all the time, but it should not be done in some specific situation. If this study that you want to include, they have got biases, don't do meta-analysis. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. So if those primary studies, they have got biases, so even the conclusion of meta-analysis to have biases. 2, variation across studies. So you may have a lot of variation across studies, like higher level of heterogeneity. So if there's a high level of heterogeneity, don't do meta-analysis. Don't combine those studies. Reporting biases. So if you have got the proof that there's a reporting biases, some studies that were done, some primary studies that were not included in the review, then don't do meta-analysis, because the conclusion that we are going to give, there will be misleading conclusion. Let's continue. So how to conduct meta-analysis? Yes. The details you always find from Prisma. All the details that are there is just summary of things. So you have to do the summary of each study. You may include more than 2, 3, 4, 10 studies. But the first step, you do the statistics summary of each study. After doing for each study, then you combine a combined summary of intervention. You put together all the studies in order to get the effect of estimate, the overall effect of estimate. Then, as you're doing meta-analysis, it's always important to know the random effect and the fixed effect. Which one should you use? Because if you know what model is there, it will help you to know if you are right to do meta-analysis or not. Because in meta-analysis, we don't want high level of variability. We don't want heterogeneity, a high level of heterogeneity. So therefore, as you are doing meta-analysis, it's better you choose the fixed effect model than the random effect model. The random effect model, there's higher level of variability there, or heterogeneity. So how to conduct meta-analysis? We continue. You should know the confidence interval. You should know the p-value, the heterogeneity. If there's a higher level of heterogeneity, you know that this meta-analysis is not well. You should not do meta-analysis if there's a high level of heterogeneity. And when there's heterogeneity, if you want, you may find the cause of that heterogeneity by doing the subgroup analysis. Then if you want to know the strength of the conclusion of your evidence, you can do the sensitivity analysis. Funnel plots is another way of knowing if there is a reporting bias. Okay. Continue. Yeah, continue. Yeah, the result for meta-analysis, most of the time they are presented in this way, in forest plot. This is the way the result will appear. Summarize in forest plot. I wanted just to show you how it appears. Yeah. So at the center, as you can see that, okay, on my side here is the left side. You have the studies that are included in your meta-analysis, okay? Thereafter, you are going to have, for this study, they were comparing caffeinated and the decaffeinated coffee. They wanted to know which one is giving headache, okay? So you have the first arm caffeinated with the total sample in each study. So one line is just one study. Like the first line there, Armor Coffee 2000 is just one study. So as you go to the right side, you have for the caffeinated, those who are taking caffeinated coffee and they develop headache, there were 2 out of 31 patients in that study. And those who were taking the caffeinated coffee, there were 10 out of 34. And the weight, it was 21.2. And the risk ratio, it was 0.22 in the 95% confidence interval of 0.05 to 0.92. The risk ratio can also be represented, as you can see, there's a vertical line. That's a line of no effect. Okay. Then for the first study, you have a horizontal line. The horizontal line, it represents you the confidence interval. And the size of effect is represented by that small square. So any line horizontal, the confidence interval that touch the line of non-effect, when it comes to make a conclusion, we can just say this study does not prove whether caffeinated or decaffeinated can give headache. But if you read properly, the first study does not touch the vertical line, the line of non-effect. So meaning, the conclusion for this, that the first study, it was caffeinated coffee can give headache. But the rest of the studies, their line of confidence interval touch the line of non-effect. So meaning, for the rest of the studies, there's no evidence. They didn't give us any evidence whether it's caffeinated or decaffeinated is giving headache. Down, you can see there's some kind of diamond that is there. This is the pooled result. All the above studies that are being combined in order to give an overall result. And the overall result is represented by the square. Okay. And even this square is touching the line of non-effect if you look at it properly. Yeah. So there's no clear evidence from this study that the coffee or caffeinated or decaffeinated coffee give headache. Yeah. Let's move to the next. Yeah, sorry. That's we are done with meta-analysis. Yeah, it's very important. But the most important, let's make sure that the result of the studies that we include in meta-analysis, they don't have a lot of variability. They don't have a high level of heterogeneity. If it's below 20 or 25, yeah, we can accept. But when the variability is too high, the I-square is too high, better to avoid to do meta-analysis. Yeah. Scoping review is another review. We'll go through the definition, the reason of doing it, how to conduct a scoping review, and then how to report scoping review. So scoping review, it is a form of knowledge synthesis that address an exploratory research question aimed at mapping key concepts, types of evidence, gaps in research related to a defined area or field by systematically searching, selecting, synthesizing existing knowledge. So when you say searching, selecting, synthesizing, it looks like a systematic review that you are doing here. But then you want just to map the key concept, evidence, the gap in knowledge. This is what you want to do here. Let's continue. So the Canadian Institute of Health Research give another definition. Scoping reviews are exploratory projects that systematically map the literature available on a topic, identifying key concepts, theories, sources of evidence, and gap in the research. Yeah, let's continue. Yeah, so we have just an illustration after this, the table 1, where they wanted to know about the definition of the term used to denote the approach of engaging community members in identifying and reporting health events occurring in the community for public health surveillance. So it's just a definition. Let's go to the next slide. So it was a scoping review. Unfortunately, we can't see it clearly, but you see it clearly on the PowerPoint presentation on your laptop or computer. So it's just over time, the definition of community-based surveillance has evolved. So this scoping review, it was just based on a definition, how this definition changed with time. Okay, that's all. Let's continue. Yeah, another study examined Zika virus characteristic on genotype, on molecular characterization, on pathogenic attributes, and the virus propagation marks. So this is the scoping review here, just to know the characteristic of Zika virus. Next slide. So the details they are there for genetic reported, genotype reported, Asian lineage 33, East Central, South African lineage, Uganda 9, just to map, to give the mapping of knowledge. That's all. Continue. Scoping review, reason of doing it, to identify the types of available evidence in a given field. Yes, people wanted to know about, is it Zika virus? Then they got information. So to clarify key concept definition in the literature. So we have seen the definition of community surveillance. Okay, so if you want to know how the definition evolve with time, then you have the answer doing scoping review. To examine how research is conducted on a certain topic or field. To identify key characteristics or factors related to a concept. So the characteristic of Zika virus, remember? So scoping review is as a precursor to a systematic review, because they look almost the same. If you want, you can start scoping review, then later you do systematic review. Okay? So to identify and analyze knowledge gap, you can also do scoping review in order to identify and analyze the knowledge gap. Next. So, preliminary step to conduct scoping review. The first step, you consult with stakeholder. Then 2, decide the approach. Which approach are you going to take? Are you going to do everything, or you are going to focus on one of the things. You can focus on identifying the type of evidence available and the knowledge gap. Or you can decide to work on clarifying the key concept or definition or characteristic. Or you can decide to examine how research is conducted. So you have to sit together with the stakeholder and make a decision. Which approach are you going to use? Instead of doing everything, you just take one approach. Continue. After you have decided on the approach, you have to build the right team. Okay. Team of reviewer, specialists in information, fund and methodology support. All people who are needed should be member of that team. Then you develop the protocol, very important. Protocol reduce risk of ad hoc decision making. Then 5, you register and publish your protocol. And 6, you conduct your scoping review. Next. How should you conduct your scoping review? Again, here, I would love to refer you to Prisma. There's a Prisma extension for scoping review. So you get more detail there, especially on reporting. Okay? On reporting. Yeah. So everything starts from the question. Even the objective depend on the question. So research questions should be there. You have to formulate. If it's not well formulated, you make sure that you reformulate it in answerable way, relying on not PICO but the PCC. That stands for population, the context, and the concept. Eligibility criteria, yes, the inclusion and the exclusion criteria, and the rationale. Search, you have to do your search in more than one database. It's the way we do also in systematic review, in more than one database. Source of evidence, you should make the list of a source of evidence, and you can even go further in the search, the gray literatures. You can go in the search, the non-published article as well, to build your scoping, because you want to do the mapping of knowledge. So you need all the data, all the information, even the non-published one, bring them in. Continue. Then you do the screening. For the process of selecting the article, you do the screening on the title and the abstract. Once you are done, then you do the screening of full text. Then you decide to select the articles that should include in your scoping review. Then the appraisal is optional, because the appraisal is going to reduce again the number of studies, the evidence that you want to put in place. Because your role is just to do the mapping, like on knowledge or the definition throughout the time. So if you put some appraisal there, maybe it's going to reduce others evidence. So appraisal is optional. Some say don't even do it. So data extraction should be done, discussion, then you consult with the stakeholder. Let's continue. Yeah, the reporting, I've said, Prisma is there. It can give you all the details. Title, abstracts, introduction, method, result, discussion, findings, everything. You find more detail with Prisma. I think that's all with it. Yeah, that's all. Let's go next. There's another review that is called rapid review. Let's go through the definition, the reason of doing it, how to conduct it, and the reporting. Next. Rapid review, a form of knowledge synthesis in which the component of systematic review process are simplified or omitted to produce information in a timely manner. So it looks like systematic review, but you have to simplify some steps. You have sometimes even to omit some step in order to produce quickly the result. Let me say, in case of an epidemic, cholera is there. So you are there as a researcher. Then the decision makers ask you to produce, to advise them on how to manage the cholera epidemic. So you have to do the rapid review. It looks like systematic review, but you have to simplify some steps. This is a study that should do in emergency. Okay? There's Ebola somewhere there, just do it. If they ask you to produce any, to advise some decision makers. Next. Another, is it Ghana in 2010, give another definition. It's a streamlined traditional systematic review method to synthesize evidence in a shorter time frame. So it's just to simplify the steps of systematic review in order to produce the evidence in short period of time. Continue. Kangura in 2012 give another definition. It's a streamlined approach to synthesize evidence, typically for informing emergent decision faced by decision makers in healthcare system. Most of the time, you have the requests from the decision makers. They're the one asking you as research, please advise. So you have to use the rapid review because there's an epidemic there, people are dying, so no time to waste. Continue. Let's see some parameters that make a difference between rapid review and systematic review. So we'll go through time, cost, and the accuracy. For rapid review, you need to produce the report within 3 months. That within, it can be weeks, it can be 2-3 weeks, it can be 1 month, 2 months, but the average is 3 months, the report is ready. For systematic review, you need 12 months and plus. It can be 2 years, it can be 3 years. It needs time. So in a situation of epidemics, you are not going to suggest to work on a systematic review because the time for you to finish the systematic review, everyone is dead. Okay. Another parameter that makes difference between the two is a cost. For you to produce a rapid review, you need $25,000, it's Canadian dollars. But for systematic review, you need 4 times the same amount. So it could cost for the decision maker, they prefer, especially actually, they prefer you as a researcher to produce a rapid review. It helps them to make quick decision, then they spend less. On the accuracy, rapid review, the accuracy is a bit low because of those some steps in the process of studies were omitted. Okay, but the systematic review is more accurate. Let's continue. Why should you do this? What's the reason? When should you decide to do rapid review? The request for timely evidence for decision making. So those who are making decision, they need your advice. So they don't have enough time to waste. There's an emergency. They have some priority. So you have to use rapid review. Let's continue. Yeah, how to conduct rapid review? Yeah, always start with a research question, eligibility criteria, searching studies, title, abstract, the same way that you are doing for systematic review. Let's jump to the next. The same way that we are doing systematic review. Other consideration, rapid review should be preceded by a protocol submitted. So it's part that you don't have enough time, but protocol is needed for rapid review, especially if you are working with Cochrane, you need to submit that protocol. The protocol should be registered by Prospero and the Science Framework. Use online software to streamline the stages of the process. Next. Now, I want just to emphasize, we say we have to streamline, we have to simplify the method. So how can you simplify the method? Let me say like we work on, is it Pico? So you can just jump on an ICOS. So you skip if you don't have enough information. If it's to try to gather the information on the population is going to take you time. Or the information that they bring to you does not specify who is sick, who is not sick. So just omit a bit P and use other parameters that are available in the data that they have got to you. So on search, normally we have to do the search in at least 2 databases, more than 1 database. But for rapid review, you need just 1 database. You can even limit the time of doing the research. When you are searching, instead of going for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you reduce less than 5 years or 2 years, or so that you reduce also the number of the study that you are going through. So you have to reduce, omit, don't look for the gray literatures. Those unpublished data, don't waste too much time. You can even limit language. Say, no, I will need just the article in Spanish. That's all. Not in English, not in Korean. Then selection, the screening, title, abstract, then full text. Normally you need at least 2 people to do that. At least 2 people. But then you can say, okay, for the sake of time, we just use 1. Okay. Next. You can just focus on electronic data available article. Don't look for the gray literature. Then the priority is systematic review when available. But then if you don't find the systematic reviews, just get whatever article you get that is under systematic review. Then extraction of the data. Normally you need at least 2 people to do the extraction of the data so that they can discuss if there are some contradiction, then you find they can compromise. They can find a common ground. But here for rapid review, just use 1 person. Okay. Then risk of bias, you just use 1 person. Synthesize, yeah, I've already said. When you are doing the summary of your result, synthesizing your data, you may prefer to do the meta-analysis if it's possible, if it's feasible. But if it's not feasible, yeah, no more meta-analysis. Then you have to do the grade, certainty, the quality of evidence. When you do the synthesis, you get the evidence. Then you want to find out the quality of that evidence. So you should use the grading system. Okay. But then you should not, for this study scope, a rapid review, try to produce the summary of findings. You can skip it. Continue. Yeah. So the reporting, yeah. So research question as title, the context, the objective, PICO, let's continue to the next. The result, citation, the collaborators, yeah. Let's go to the next. Yeah, I think that's all. That's all with this study. So we have the next one is an umbrella review. Review of review or overview. Let's continue. A synthesis of findings from systematic. It is a synthesis of findings from systematic review on the same question. So you are going to collect the systematic review and make a summary, a synthesis. The analysis may be on the review or the studies within the reviews. You can do your synthesis, analyze the review themselves, or you can go to the studies that were used to produce those reviews and analyze. Let's continue. When should you decide and why should you decide to do the umbrella review? You want to produce user-friendly summaries of the research relevant to decision without decision makers needing to assimilate the result of multiple systematic review themselves. So you need just to produce one report, a user-friendly report. You are not going to ask the decision makers, most of the time they don't have time to read the 5-10 articles. So you want just to produce a user-friendly summary. Okay. Overviews can also be conducted more quickly compared to systematic reviews. So if you are well organized, you can produce it very fast than systematic review. Next. How to conduct definition, research question. Always the question is on top. Then objective, selection, criteria, search strategy, inclusion, assessment, methodology of quality, risk of biases. Next. Data collection, analysis, certainty of evidence using the grading system. Continue. Do not use umbrella review to draw inference about the comparative effectiveness of multiple intervention. So if you are facing multiple, you have more combination, you have multiple interventions, better you use network meta-analysis than using umbrella review. Okay. So reporting is a long one. I think you are going to read. I've seen you are tired that side. I think you go through the PowerPoint presentation later. Just move to the next. 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 It's a long one here. Next. Just go to the next. Next. Yeah. Next. 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 Yeah. We are almost toward the end. Leaving systematic review is another type of review. It's very common at the moment. So we are going to go to the background, very important for leaving systematic review. I want to say here, in 2005, the researcher was able to produce 75 trials per day in 2005. Now, the major term for study to be included in systematic review it used to take 2.5 years to 6 years for those primary studies to get included in the systematic review. And the medium-term survival of systematic review accuracy is 4.6 to 7.6 years. So if you analyze properly, the time that some studies, primary studies that should have been included in systematic review, the time that those studies, some study got expired, their evidence needed an update before they get published in the systematic review. This, the information that I want you to get from this slide. So the inclusion of the primary study, the trial, was done after the evidence containing in those trials were needing an update. Now, the living systematic review is an emerging opportunity to narrow the evidence practice gap, because it was noticed that there was a gap between the production of evidence and the time for the doctor to get that systematic review and then update his practice. So living systematic review is the answer to that problem. Let's continue. Living systematic review is just a systematic review that is continuously adapted, incorporating new evidence as it becomes available. As soon as the new evidence is available, yeah, we have to include in the review. Okay. So, when or in which circumstances you can use this living systematic review? In the context of rapidly emerging disease, just pick the case of COVID-19. COVID-19 came, we didn't have enough knowledge on how it gets transmitted, how to treat COVID, how to prevent COVID. We had a lot of gap in our knowledge. So living systematic review is very important in such kind of situation where you are caught up with a new disease and you don't have enough evidence. So you need a systematic review, a living systematic review. So unexpected methodology and the clinical challenges, yes. When you have challenges on the clinical, how to manage any condition, like I'll just pick the example for COVID. Lack of systematic review currency that impaired knowledge translation. We had no evidence on how to manage COVID when it came. Delay from study publication to systematic review. So remember what I've presented on the previous slide. There was a delay on publication in the systematic review. And then survival systematic review accuracy. If the systematic review that we have actually, they have expired. I mean, the evidence that in those systematic review have expired. So we need a living systematic review. Next. Then when to do the living systematic review, the review question is particularly priority for decision making. See COVID, whatever evidence researcher can find is very important for decision making. There is an important level of uncertainty in the existing evidence. There is likely to be emerging evidence that will impact on no conclusion. So if you are expecting any breakthrough evidence, yes, so you have to conduct a living systematic review in order to update regularly your review. Next. Yeah, so on a conduction, how to conduct it, just refer to systematic review methodology, how to conduct. But I want to emphasize on the need for this living systematic review to use electronic database, trial register, and since you need to update regularly, you can put like on monthly basis, you need to update. So you can use your electronic database monthly as you are looking for new evidence. You can even look for other sources like information coming from conferences. And the search strategy should be ongoing. You don't stop doing research because the clinician need evidence to update their practice. Next. Yeah, then you do the selection of studies. You have to screen monthly if search is monthly. If you are doing the search month, then you have to screen monthly. Use technology tools to support screening like machine learning, data extraction, and the risk of bias assessment. The way that you are doing for systematic review is a way that should be. Continue. Synthesis, you have to synthesize your data, you have planned to publish your data, and publication should be done online. For living systematic review, you publish your update online. Continue. If it's possible, if you have got any idea on when the review will no longer be kept living, you can inform. If you know when this review will stop being living. So the living year, you have every month to look for new evidence and update your guideline. So when should you stop? If you know, yes, you write. If it's not clear, it's not clear, you just write it. Next. Yeah. Reporting, same way, abstracts, background, methodology, continue. Definition, overall study design, eligibility criteria, search strategy, article selection, data abstraction, continue. Data analysis plan, dissemination, status, discussion, and the data availability, continue. Yeah, I want you to know about this. The living systematic review basic process. So you can run your research, your search, and screen. If you don't have any evidence, so that's all for that month, okay? But if you get a new evidence, integrate later or you integrate now. If the evidence that you get can change the course of like treatment, is very important for the management of patient, for example. So immediately that you get that evidence, you do the data extraction, the risk of bias, then you do the synthesis, then you update your review. Continue. So we are done. We have remained with, I think, 2 more. This is a mixed method systematic review. Of course, you have to combine here quantitative and qualitative data in order to produce this review. Next. Mixed method systematic review can be defined as combining the findings of qualitative and the result of quantitative studies within a single systematic review to address the same overlapping or complementary review questions. Continue. Let's continue. The reason of doing it, let's go back. Yeah. Multidisciplinary topics. So you can have in your question there, the multidisciplinary topic or topics with body of literature that include quantitative and qualitative data. Okay. So you need to produce your evidence with your figures, but then you need to know, for example, the experience of people, of patients. So that time you need to use mixed method systematic review. When you want to determine, to identify research gap as well, this study can help you to identify the research gap. Let's continue. To provide an explanation for possible heterogeneity between trials, this can help. To answer multiple questions in one systematic review. To integrate quantitative estimates of benefits and harm with more qualitative understanding for multiple, for people lives. So sometimes you can get the evidence. This is the figures that we get through quantitative studies, but you need some explanation. You want to understand why we have this result. So you need to use a study that combines quantitative and qualitative data. Continue. Yeah, we can continue. Continue. Yeah, there are some concepts that I want you to know. Yeah, some concept. Just go back, one step back. Yeah. Simultaneous consecutive data analysis. So if you say simultaneous, so sometimes for some studies, you need to collect the qualitative and the quantitative data at the same time. And for other studies, you need to collect first the qualitative data or the quantitative data, then you collect the other one later. That's a consecutive analysis. Then data transformation. You need, if you have a quantitative and a qualitative data. In order to synthesize properly the two, you need to transform, for example, the qualitative in quantitative, if it's possible, or the qualitative in quantitative before you make a conclusion. Continue. Mixed method research questions. So the question that you may have can be explanatory, exploratory, or convergent. Okay. Now you need some specific design according to those questions. You can do the sequential explanatory design, sequential exploratory, and the concurrent convergent. So for sequential explanatory, so you start with one OTAP for the studies, either quantitative or qualitative, then you finish with the other in order to answer the question. Concurrent, so you have to get the data, the quantitative and the quantitative at the same time. Okay, let's continue. There are three types of research questions. Okay, with the mixed method, you have got three types of questions. We have said there's explanatory question, there's a exploratory question, and there's a convergent question. So when conducting the research, if you have got an exploratory question, you should use the sequential design, meaning you start with the collection of quantitative data, then you continue with qualitative data in order to answer the question. Next. If you have exploratory questions, What type of sequential design that should you use? Which type of design that should you use? Should be also sequential design, where you start with the qualitative, then you end with a quantitative. So the qualitative phase will inform the quantitative phase on the answer to provide. Continue. Convergent questions. If you have got convergent questions, it's like an open-ended question. The answer is known, but you need to provide just the answer, not your thinking that time. So if you have got convergent questions, you can decide to use the concurrent design, where you select the quantitative and qualitative data at the same time. Next. Next. Now, you can hear something or you can read somewhere. Mixed method, multiple method. Are they the same things or two different things? Mixed method, multiple method. For mixed method, qualitative and quantitative data are mixed together in order to answer the same research question. Okay. But multiple method is not mixed method. Qualitative and quantitative data are kept separate and they answer two different types of research questions. So please don't substitute mixed method with multiple method. Review. Next. Now, how to conduct your review. Convergent integrated approach is one of the approaches that you can use. Data transformation first, then data synthesis. Two, convergent segregated approach. Data synthesis separately, then integration of quantitative and qualitative data later. So the nature of the research question will determine which approach to use. Continue. Yeah. So you have all the details here. How to conduct convergent integrated design. Okay. Always the protocol is needed. Research questions should be analyzed. Inclusion criteria, search strategy, selection, appraisal, data extraction. But when you reach the synthesis, it's the time that you should do also the integration of the data, qualitative and the quantitative. So qualitize quantitative data in the text format so that result can be assembled with the qualitative data. Next. But when you have a convergent disaggregate approach, synthesis plus integration is where it is very important. Other step is just the same, but for integration, synthesis and the integration. So you conduct first meta-analysis for quantitative data, but you do the meta-regression for qualitative data. Then you juxtapose the quantitative result and the qualitative result, and then try to interlink and find the explanation that you are going to write as your findings. Next. Organize results together by considering the following trigger question. I think this you can just read. Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next. Yeah. So on the reporting, there's a gram that has suggested the way of reporting. Grams template can just go through and report in this way. Next. There's another reporting system where you can start with the abstracts, background. Next. Methodology, data source, and the search strategy. Next. Next. Discussion, abbreviation, reference. I think you can choose which format do you want to make your report. Next. This is the last one. Network meta-analysis. Yeah. Most of the time you can see some studies, systematic review and the network, meta-analysis. But network meta-analysis is something that come after that. So network meta-analysis definition, reason, why should you conduct this, how to conduct it, and then I think there is need to edit. You remove the MMSR. Yeah, that one should be removed. Conducting should be network meta-analysis, not multiple, not mixed method, systematic review. I think you will help me to edit there. Next. So what is network meta-analysis? Any set of studies that links 3 or more intervention via direct comparison form a network of intervention. Now, network meta-analysis combines direct and the indirect estimate across a network of intervention in a single analysis. So remember we said when you are doing the umbrella studies, a review, when you are doing review of reviews, don't combine 3 or 4 studies like the way that we can combine and produce some evidence. So when you are dealing with more than 3 comparisons to do, or more than 2, you have to use network meta-analysis. When you have got just 2, yes, you can do other studies, systematic review, you can do your meta-analysis, yeah, when you are comparing 2 things. But when you are comparing more than 2, 3 in one study, so you can use the network meta-analysis. Next. Yeah, it's a way that you can see here. There's a study that there's a intervention there, there's intervention here, intervention there, and there. So MMT intervention, PTCA intervention, then BMS intervention. In some studies here, it can be the placebo, for example. So we can compare the placebo to this drug. We can compare the placebo to another drug. So if you have just to compare placebo to this drug and placebo to the other drug, you can do your meta-analysis to give you the answer. But then if you don't know now the evidence between these 2, you don't have information between MT and the PTCA, your meta-analysis can't give, because in the article you have just evidence between MT and the BMS and the evidence between BMS and the PTCA. So in your meta-analysis, you're not going to find anything that can help you to find now the evidence between PTCA and the MT. So you need network meta-analysis when you are facing more than 2 comparison. Next. Next. Yeah. I think here you can see there are a lot of data. There are antidepressant or anticonvulsant data here compared to placebo. There are some studies, existing study between all the anticonvulsants with placebo. But within themselves, no studies. There are some indirect relationship between the two. So if you want to find the relationship now between the other drugs in between themselves, or if you want to find the ranking, which drug is the best, which drug is more effective than other drugs, so you have to do the network meta-analysis. It will give you the answer. Next. Next. Oh yeah, put a lot of graphs there. Next. 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 So reason, no. One step back. Reason of doing a network meta-analysis. You want to exploit all available direct and indirect evidence. Most of the time we may have the direct evidence and we don't have indirect evidence where there are no studies. So network meta-analysis can give you the evidence, the indirect evidence. So network meta-analysis, it can give you higher level of precision. So if you want to have higher level of precision when you're doing the comparison of more than 3, so network meta-analysis can help you. Provide info for comparison between pairs of intervention that have never been evaluated within individual randomized control trial. This is what I've said. Then when you want to do the ranking of all the intervention of interest, okay, so you do the network meta-analysis. Next. So validity of network meta-analysis rely on a transitivity for every indirect comparison. Coherence is in every loop of evidence within the network. Heterogeneity within each direct comparison in the network. Continue. Conducting, yes, the protocol, very important, you should have it. Research question, if it is not well formulated, you reformulate properly in the answerable form. Study selection, of course, there are some steps there. You have to screen. You have to screen. And the study extraction should be done. Look for biases. Next. Assessment of heterogeneity should be done. It's very important. Assessment of transitivity and coherence. Assessment of reporting bias, very important. Data synthesis should be done. Pairwise meta-analysis, dual study comparison. You can compare two drugs, and network meta-analysis when it comes to multiple study comparison. You can use just in one study, you have the results, including all the comparison. Then the ranking of probability should be done. Continue. Subgroup analysis and the integration of heterogeneity, sensitivity analysis, summary of findings, and the assessment of certainty of evidence are needed. Continue. So how to report it? Title, abstract, PICO, plain language. You should explain in a simple language the conclusion of study and whatever. Other conclusion, author conclusions, summary of findings, background, objective, method, result, discussion, finding. So this is a way to go. I hope you see the last slide. I hope you see the last one. Continue. Yeah, so you have this slide that I found somewhere, trying to compare the different study that you went through. So in his systematic review, the inclusion unit is a primary study. In a living systematic review, the inclusion unit is a study. What makes difference between systematic review and the living systematic review is the way that you conduct the search of evidence of articles is ongoing with the living systematic review. But with your systematic review, you do just once. Rapid review, yes, it needs more adjustment. You need to provide the result very fast. Therefore, the protocol, yeah, is needed, but there should be some flexibility if it's not there. Then there should be some modification on the way that you are conducting your search because of time. You need to produce the result very fast. So you have be having modification on the search. Instead of looking for the evidence in more than one database, you can just do it in one. Selection, instead of using 2 people to do the selection, you can just use 1 person. Yeah, there are a lot of modification that should take place because you want to provide the result as quick as possible. Scoping review, yes, you are using the systematic review instead of for single articles. Yeah, and you need to reassess and analyze. For overview or the umbrella review, yes, you need a protocol, but there should be some flexibility. And then you need to include studies. Better, you can use it as systematic reviews. You can do the chatting, and then your synthesis is more descriptive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oscar Ngongo. We are really happy to have you to give this class. I think that this class is one of the more important in our course because it says what are the different types of articles we can do and what considerations we have to take in each of these articles. So thanks a lot, Doctor. It was a really good class, really complete, and we hope to have you on June. I think we are scheduled 24th of June for the Cochrane class. So we will see you soon.
Thank you very much for your time. And sorry to keep you long listening and watching. I think I've chewed most of your time today. I think next time I will make sure that I'm just within an hour. The presentation that can last just within an hour, not over.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Don't worry,
Okay.
it's okay. And then there are some.
Let's meet.
Mhm.
You want to say something?
No, Doctor. Sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. But for next time, for the connection, let's just send all the details before. Then we can even try if it's working so that we shouldn't disappoint our colleagues who come, then there's nothing.
Yeah, Doctor, we will do it in that way so that we can prevent some issues like this.
Yeah, and over this presentation, if there are other questions, I think even after this time, I think we should direct the question to me so that I provide the answers.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
And if someone of the colleagues want to make a question, write it or write it later, and I will send you to your email for answer.
Okay.
Okay, doctor.
Okay. Thank you, Renato. See you next.
Thanks a lot, doctor. We will see you in June. So thanks for you.
Thank you. Thank you also, Cecilia. Marine.
Yeah, you're welcome, doctor. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Welcome. Okay, thank you.
Pues gracias a todos. Nos estamos viendo en la siguiente sesión, 10 de junio. Doctor Iván Pérez Neri, el doctor Gongo nos va a dar la siguiente en junio, 24 de junio, para hablarnos sobre Cochrane. Entonces, pues nos estamos viendo y suerte a todos. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias, hasta luego.
Gracias, hasta luego.